We often treat the Old Testament like a collection of fragments, right? A verse here, a psalm there. But what if we've been missing the big picture? Today, we are stepping way back to see the Old Testament for what it really is. Not just a book of quotes, but one single epic story. And this right here gets to the heart of it. So many of us, myself included, we collect verses like they're souvenirs. We pull them out of context for a little inspiration or maybe to win an argument. But when we do that, we can totally miss the grand narrative that God was telling through history, through real people, and over a vast stretch of time. We end up missing the voice of the story itself. So, that's the big question for this whole explainer, isn't it? What is the shape of this story? We're about to go on a journey to find the structure, the stage, and the timeline that holds the entire Old Testament together. Okay, first things first. Let's tackle this habit of treating the Bible like it's just a book of inspirational quotes. To really get it, we have to see it as something way bigger and a lot more complex. Now, I love this metaphor. Just think about it for a second. The Old Testament alone, that's 39 different books written over 1,000 years by all kinds of people. We're talking shepherds, kings, prophets, even exiles. Each book is its own unique voice in this grand chorus, and every single one has a specific place on the shelf. And this just drives the point home. The word we use, Bible, comes from the Greek word biblia, which doesn't mean book. It's plural. It means the books. So from the very beginning, it was meant to be seen as a collection, a whole library, telling one unified story. So if every verse belongs in a book, and every book belongs in history, where do we even start? We start by asking two really simple but really powerful questions. To get into any story, you've got to know the setting. Where did all this stuff unfold, and when did it happen? These two questions give us our coordinates. So let's start with the where. Before we can even begin to understand the plot, we have to get a feel for the stage. The geography of the ancient world isn't just some boring backdrop. It's practically a character in the story, shaping everything that happens. So picture the ancient world. It was basically dominated by two superpowers. These two massive civilizations that formed the bookends of what we call the Fertile Crescent. On one side, you had Egypt, this powerhouse built on the predictable, life-giving rhythms of the Nile River. And on the other side, you had Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, home to huge empires like Babylon and Assyria. Okay, so you have these two giants, these two ancient worlds staring each other down. And caught right in the middle, connecting them, was this tiny, narrow little strip of land. And that land was Israel. Its location was absolutely crucial. And let me tell you, it was no accident. It was basically a land bridge, the only real path between Africa, Asia, and Europe. If you lived there, you were living smack in the middle of all the action. And living at the world's crossroads had massive consequences. Every trade route, it passed right through. Every invading army, it marched right through. It was a place where empires were constantly colliding. This made it super vulnerable, easily conquered, and often occupied. So here's the key. God put his people in a spot where the world could not possibly ignore them. For better and for worse. All right, so that's the where. Now let's talk about the when. We're zooming out from the map to a timeline that covers 2,000 years. The story of the Old Testament isn't static. It unfolds in what you can think of as four great movements. Around 2000 BC, the whole thing kicks off with the patriarchs. God calls Abraham and his family. Fast forward 500 years to around 1500 BC, and you get the Exodus. This is the age of prophets like Moses, where God forges a nation. Then, another 500 years, around 1000 BC, we get the Empire, the age of kings like David, when a kingdom rises to its peak. But that kingdom falls apart, which leads to the exile. And finally, there's the return, led by priests and scribes as the people come back to rebuild. See the pattern? Patriarchs, prophets, kings, and priests. Each era has its own kind of leadership that pushes the story forward. And then, silence. After the last prophets of the Old Testament, for 400 years, God goes quiet. No new prophets, no new revelation. Now, during this time, human empires are making a ton of noise. Greece rises, then Rome takes over. But the scriptures don't record man's noise. It records God's action. So Revelation waits. So let's recap. We've got the place, the crossroads of the world. And we've got the time, a 2,000-year timeline. But here's where it gets really interesting. Biblical history is so much more than just a record of events. It's not neutral. It's history with a voice. It's God speaking through what happened. Now, this is fascinating. Our modern Bibles usually group the books into history, poetry, and prophets, but the original Hebrew Bible was structured differently: the law, the prophets, and the writings. And here's the real shocker. In that original structure, the books we call history, like Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, they're actually included under the section called the prophets. So why on earth would they do that? Well, it's because biblical history isn't just a neutral play-by-play of what happened. It's prophetic. First, it carefully selects what to tell us, focusing only on the events that matter to God's story. And second, it connects those events to their meaning, showing us over and over again this pattern that obedience leads to life and rebellion leads to death and exile. It's history with a message. Okay, let's put this all together now. We've got the stage, that vulnerable crossroads. We've got the timeline, a 2,000-year story of rise and fall. And we have the meaning, this idea of God speaking through all those events. Now, finally, we can start to see the shape of the whole story. The story of the Old Testament builds all the way up to the glory of King David's throne, and then it all tragically falls apart into division, defeat, and finally exile. So, for centuries, there was this one question that echoed through the people of Israel: when will the kingdom be restored? It's the great unresolved cliffhanger of the Old Testament. And, incredibly, it's the very same question the disciples asked Jesus, which bridges the two testaments perfectly. The story was always pointing forward. So, here's the bottom line. When we see the geography, the timeline, and that prophetic voice, the Old Testament completely transforms. It's no longer a flat collection of ancient, disconnected writings. It becomes what it was always meant to be: one single, coherent, costly, and powerful story of God's unfolding plan for the world. The question now isn't just, what does this verse mean? It's, where does this verse fit in this incredible story?